Hey, we're starting a new series there. It's called Interesting Questions. But today's going to seem like we didn't leave our last series, because we're talking about a question today that says, am I my brother's keeper? And in reality, we're saying, do you love your brother? And so we're going to be talking about that, but we're going to be talking about very much hands-on things today about being our brother's keeper. You see, that question is first found in Genesis chapter 4, verse 9, where a man asked God about our relationship with each other. When Cain said, am I my brother's keeper? We still ask that question today, especially if we're trying to shirk some responsibility that we have to somebody else. But since Cain, every generation has questioned how we ought to relate to our brothers. Do we love them? Do we hate them? Well, what if they hate us? Or what if they're different from us? Can't we just live and let live? How does God want us to relate to others? Well, John addressed that question in 1 John chapter 3, where we spent a lot of time over that last series. In 1 John chapter 3, beginning in verse 11. For this is the message you heard from the beginning. We should love one another. Do not be like Cain, who belonged to the evil one and murdered his brother. And why did he murder him? Because his own actions were evil and his brothers were righteous. Do not be surprised, my brothers and sisters, if the world hates you. We know that we have passed from death to life because we love each other. Anyone who does not love remains in death. Anyone who hates his brother or sister is a murderer. And you know that no murderer has eternal life residing in him. Verse 16, this is how we know that what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. If anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? Dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but with actions and truth. Cain's question, am I my brother's keeper? We need to understand the context there, because that was a very disrespectful question to pose to God. He was just trying to get God off his back. That's what that was about. However, it is an important question that needs to be answered because it deals with our basic relationships. If we can answer this question right, then probably we can begin to live in harmony with other people. In order to answer Cain's question, I want to ask three other questions. The first is, who is my brother? The second is, am I really responsible for my brother? And thirdly, what should I do for my brother? Let's begin with that first one. Who is my brother? 1 John 3:12 makes reference to Cain's killing his brother. So as we first consider who is my brother, we should remember what Jesus taught us. You see, Jesus was asked the same kind of question in Luke chapter 10 and verse 29. When a scribe tried to entrap Jesus, and Jesus turned the tables on him and put him on the spot, and Jesus implied that to the scribe wasn't in his right relationship with God or right relationship with his neighbor. And so to justify himself, the scribe asked, well then, just who is my neighbor? And Jesus answered with the parable of the Good Samaritan. And when you get into that story in Luke chapter 10, if you go down to verses 36 and 37, you find these words. Which of these three do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? The expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. Jesus told him, go and do likewise. Let me give you my best interpretation of those verses. Our neighbor is anyone in need of our love. Our neighbor is anyone that is in need of our love. And let's listen. Can we agree this morning that every person in this world has a need. I don't think there's anybody sitting here this morning that doesn't have a need. I believe that everybody in the world has needs. Now, most of the time, we just think that down and outs have needs. But can I tell you, the up and outs have needs too? Think about it. I saw an interview years ago with Bill Gates, one of the richest people in the world, right? He was one of the up and outs. But there are things that money couldn't buy. And as he talked about it, he said, he couldn't buy true friends. He couldn't buy good health. He couldn't buy peace of mind. He couldn't buy a spirit. And I will tell you what, if Bill Gates doesn't have a relationship with Jesus, he still has the greatest need in the world. His money will never buy him answers about death and where he'll spend eternity. He needs a Savior just like every one of us do. And without Jesus, there's no salvation. We witnessed this not as long ago as what that interview was that I saw, but a guy by the name of Steve Jobs. Remember the story of him with the cancer and how he just dwindled to nothing? And toward the end, he began to ask the right questions. But it was too late in many respects. Because his money, and he was very wealthy, could not buy what he was so desperately needed in his life. And that is a relationship with Jesus. Acts chapter 17, verse 26 says, every person came from one blood through Noah back to Adam. Since we're all brothers and sisters in the human race, we just wonder how evil people can commit such horrible atrocities that occur like those in third world countries. There's this cultic group. They're a bunch of leaders, and they're in Uganda. Listen to what the title of it is. The movement is to restore the 10 Commandments. That group of people have murdered more people, and I'm going to show my age here. They've murdered more people than what Jim Jones did in 1978 with his Kool-Aid. They now are at 924 graves that they've uncovered, and they're still uncovering more graves of people. And they say they're restoring the 10 Commandments. But let me share with you that if we don't love our brothers and sisters, we don't keep our brothers and sisters, then we are no different. There's no difference between us and those cultic leaders. Think about that. Who is my brother? Anyone needing your love? Their race, their social standing, their physical features, how they dress, the language they speak, should have nothing to do with our decision to love them. Because you see, under the skin, their blood's just as red as ours is. They have the same hurts, same pains that you and I have. But they also have the same joys that you and I have. There's a spiritual from many years ago, a song that had the lyrics of this: no man is an island, no man stands alone. Each man's joy is joy to me, each man's grief is my own. Folks, I want to tell you, who is my neighbor? Any and all fellow members of the human race qualify. They qualify as our brothers, since every person in this world has needs. So let's get to the crux of it. Am I really responsible? Am I really responsible for my brother? Most of us sitting here this morning, very sad to say, but you'd say, no, I'm not responsible for someone else's actions. I agree. We're not responsible for their actions. And that may be true, but we may be responsible for why they're acting the way they do. Because listen, if we reach out in love to other people, there's a real possibility that we could stop some of the violence that's happening today. You see, because the people that are causing the violence, they're doing those things that are so bad in our culture around us. They're doing that because they're reaching out. They're looking for help. They're looking for answers. But they're looking in all the wrong places. We have the answers. And some of these guys just need a friend to show them the right way to solve their problems. There's a pastor in in Washington, D.C. He has a church, not a real big church. Church is like about the size of ours. But his major role is in the city. And every time that there's violence and there's gun used, and they the cops track the gun down and who had it and who used it and all that, that person becomes his project. So far to date, he's got about 280 disciples because they have followed his advice rather than the gangs that they were in. He's making a difference. One young man and women at a time, because he's loving his neighbor. He's keeping his brother. See, the world needs that now, because we're all brothers and neighbors on this very small planet. You heard the phrase, the world's getting smaller and smaller? I believe it. I believe that to be true. 1 John chapter 3 verse 11 says, this is the message that we have heard from the beginning, that we love one another. Who told us that? Jesus did. In Matthew chapter 22, when the church began, this is what Jesus said. Before he died, he said that we could fulfill all God's laws required just by loving God and loving others. That's all we need to do. And after Jesus died to provide the salvation that Scott so eloquently mentioned this morning, the Father had John to change those requirements just a bit. When in verse 23, he says, God's command for us now is believe in his Son, Jesus Christ, and love one another. So am I responsible for my brother? Absolutely. We are all responsible for our brothers. The answer is yes. We have to turn all the way through the Bible. Cain's question was in Genesis chapter 4, verse 9. The answer is in 1 John, which is at the back end of the Bible. We went from the front of the Bible to the back of the Bible. And verse 16 of 1 John 3 says, even to the point of laying down our lives for our brothers. Whoa. Pretty heavy, huh? Coming straight out of the book. Am I responsible? Yes. Okay, if I'm responsible, then what should I do for my brother? What should I do? Let's get to the practical meat of the matter. Verses 17 and 18 of 1 John 3. If anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? Dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but with actions and truth. That is heavy. That is heavy. We're told that if we have the means to help someone in need, then we need to share with them. Otherwise, how can we say that the love of God is in us? You know, there's one thing that I really love about our church. No one can get into a pew in this church without being bombarded with love. It's amazing. And I hear from so many people who do come and visit with us how friendly we are and how that they visited some churches and people walked right by them. Never said a word. I can't fathom that. I don't know what that would be like. But yet there are churches that don't say a word until they're directed at the beginning of the service for a welcome time. And so when they have the welcome time, they'll go greet the people. I am so glad we don't have a welcome time. And we don't have it because of how you respond to people coming in. If we weren't responding to people, then we probably would need to have a welcome time, but we don't. because we respond to people who come through those doors with the love that God has called us to have. I believe that we, as a body right here, have developed a mindset of genuine concern for people that we meet. But I want to carry that a little bit further this morning. I want you to think about this. Is the clerk that you talk with at the grocery store married? Let's be honest, sometimes we don't even take the time to look at their finger to see if they are, let alone ask the question, right? How many children does she have? How many children does he have? Where do they go to church? Or do they go to church? How about the service people that you deal with? The people that come and fix the furnace, or the people who pick up your trash, or the mechanic who services your car. What do you personally know about any of these brothers of ours? When you start to talk, then you find out if they're hurting and they just need a friend to talk to. It happens, and it happens a lot. Folks, do they need something that you could share? Listen, the most precious gifts that Scott talked about this morning that you can give doesn't cost you a penny. Jesus has already paid the price. It's their salvation. But they won't know that unless somebody tells them. And you're telling them about the love of Jesus doesn't matter a whole lot unless they see that love in you. I heard a saying, I can't tell you how many years ago, probably 40, maybe 50 years ago, I heard this saying, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. You ever heard that? So which is first? We got to show them how much we care so they'll listen to how much we know. Remember what James wrote? James chapter 1, verse 27. Pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this: to visit the fatherless and the widows in their affliction, and to keep yourself unspotted from the world. And then he said in chapter 2 that we prove that faith. We prove those with the actions of the good works that we have. The proper response when someone has reached the bottom is not, hey, he made his bed, let him lie in it. But folks, we ought to be thinking and saying, man, rather, there but for the grace of God go I. I need to help my brother because somebody helped me. I trust that everyone here this morning knows that we have a care ministry. The director of our care ministry is Tina Tryon. Tina, stand up back there. Everybody look over there. Put her on the spot. Look at her good. Tina is the director of this care ministry not because we needed to fill a staff position. Okay? Tina's in that position because she has a heart for people. She visits nursing homes and hospitals and homebound people. And those people are not at the front of our minds. But yet they are our brothers and sisters. So I want to tell you this morning, if you have a heart for caring for folks, I want you to check with Tina after the service about helping her in that ministry. Become part of her team. Look at the final verse of 1 John chapter 3, verse 24. It says, the one who keeps God's commands lives in him, and he in them. And this is how we know that he lives in us. We know it by the Spirit he gave us. Folks, it's this is how we know that we belong to the truth. And that is when our hearts are at rest, when our hearts are at peace. They don't condemn us. And we have confidence before God and receive from him anything we ask because we obey his commands. That's what pleases him. And this is the command to believe in the name of Jesus, the name of his Son, Jesus Christ, and love one another. Next month, we're going to celebrate a day on a Sunday morning. You might know what that day is. Anybody thinking about Easter yet? Oh, it's coming quick. But next month we're going to talk about Easter. We're going to draw attention to the cross, which is a proper thing to do. The cross, vertical beam, horizontal beam. What's that represent? It reminds us of the two greatest responsibilities that we have, the relationship that we have with God, the love that we have with God, and the love that we have for our brothers and sisters in keeping our brothers and sisters. Maybe that's why Jesus told us to take up our crosses daily. He wants us to be reminded every day we need to love him and we need to love them. Am I my brother's keeper? Yes.